Just north of the big station, there is a tunnel cut into the cliff face. It isn't the longest tunnel on the island, but it had a reputation for being very poorly ventilated throughout. As a result, the smoke from engines' funnels tended to bounce straight off the ceiling and choke the crew in the cab. To make matters worse, the tunnel was on a steep gradient heading into the big station. This made the risks even higher. The solution to the problem was for the driver to build up speed before getting to the foot of the gradient. Then, when the train reached the tunnel, the driver had to shut the regulator to prevent any smoke coming out of the funnel. By doing this, they could coast through the tunnel and over the top of the hill before coasting down towards the yards. It is the only safe thing to do in this situation. A few days after his arrival, the Fat Controller came to see Blandford at the sheds.
"I see you're getting the hang of shunting here, Blandford, but I need Warrior and Winston elsewhere, so you will need to shift the loads of ballast down to the yards at Tidmouth yourself."
"Why, sir, of course,"
replied Blandford eagerly. "When do I start?"
"I need you to start today. We're off to a busy start this year, but I wager you'll manage once Duck and Oliver tell you what to do."
But Blandford wasn't keen on taking instructions from either of the Westerners. When Duck and Oliver tried to tell him what to do before approaching the tunnel, he wouldn't listen. "Accelerate hard at the foot of the hill and coast through the tunnel," Duck advised. "It's the best way of managing through." Blandford just glared at him without saying a word, but gave an agreeable grunt before puffing away to prepare. Before long, he set out towards the big station with 15 loaded ballast trucks. As he passed Duck at the water column, he muttered the word "traitor" loud enough for Duck to hear. Duck was shocked, but quite confused at the same time. "Well, bust my boiler, what rudeness!"
"I hear you deserve that," said a voice.
Duck looked around him and saw Blister 2 standing nearby. "How do you mean?" he asked with surprise. Blister 2 told him what Blandford had said.
"You closed his railway and sent him for scrap."
"But I've never been to Somerset. I've only worked around Paddington, and I can't imagine that Oliver's ever been there either."
"I admit he was a bit exaggerative," said Blister 2,
becoming more sympathetic to Duck.
"But it sounds like he knows about the pride that you two seem to show."
"We're proud of being Great Western," Duck stated, starting to become more uptight. "But neither of us was responsible for his railway closing down. I've nothing else to say." And with that, he stormed away to fetch his coaches. Blandford was out on the branch having no trouble at all. The trucks came along quietly and he was steaming well. But he was still very angry.
"Bloomin' Westerners," he muttered to himself, "telling me what to do. Accelerate hard at the foot of the hill and coast through the tunnel, they say. There's nothing wrong with puffing in a tunnel."
But he didn't realize about the ventilation problems. When they reached the foot of the climb, his driver opened the regulator and spurred Blandford on.
"Go to it, boy!"
But Blandford wasn't concentrating on the climb. He dawdled until they were halfway up the bank, and then he stormed up it with all his might.
"No, boy!"
shouted his driver and tried frantically to shut off steam. But it was too late. They ploughed into the tunnel and sped up. Hot sparks and thick smoke billowed into the cab, with hot ash raining down on the cab roof. The driver and fireman tried to cover up their mouths with a damp cloth, but the fumes were too dense. When they reached the other end of the tunnel, the gradient went from uphill to down. Blandford's speed began to increase at a dangerous rate.
"Brakes! Quickly!"
he called to the crew. But there was no reply. Both driver and fireman passed out in the tunnel. Blandford was on his own. The trucks soon realized what was going on and seized the opportunity.
"Go on! Go on!"
they giggled in their silly way as Blandford sped helplessly on and on. At the yards, a shunter could see Blandford coming towards him at a great speed. He tried waving a red flag in a bid to alert the crew, but they were in no position to do anything. In a desperate attempt to save the train, he ran to the points leading into a runaway siding. But by the time he reached them, Blandford had passed through and was heading straight for the yards. The train swerved violently into the next siding, only just staying on the track. The force of the swerve knocked Blandford's driver into the cab wall, waking him up in fright. Realizing what was happening, he quickly shut off steam and slammed on the brakes. But the train was going much too fast to slow down in time, and there was a line of loaded ballast trucks directly ahead of them. Upon seeing this, the driver grabbed the fireman and jumped from the cab, whilst Blandford just shut his eyes. The crash echoed around the yard, while stones flew and landed everywhere. Blandford just lay on his side, feeling dazed and hurt. "What have I done?" he mourned. It wasn't long before workmen arrived to clear the mess. At that point, Blandford didn't think that the situation could get any worse. But he was wrong.
"I don't know why I bother,"
said a voice. Blandford looked up and saw the Fat Controller frowning at him.
"I thought that you could help us out, but you've just made things even worse."
I'm sorry, sir," stuttered Blandford. "But I didn't think that—"
"I'm not in the mood to care,"
came the blunt reply.
"You're going to the works for fast-track repairs. Then I'm giving you one last chance to redeem yourself. And if you let me down again, I will send you back to where you came from. And I don't think you'll want that, will you?"
Blandford didn't say anything, but he knew that he had a lot to think about.